Hi, it's Samantha from Samantha by Design. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. Thank you so much for joining me for today's acrylic painting tutorial, where I'll be showing you how to paint impressionistic daisies from start to finish. This is perfect for beginners, so let's get started. So let's go over some of our materials we'll be using today. So I'm using an 8x10 canvas board. I have a foam plate as a palette, a jar of water, some paper towel, and also a little water mister to keep my paint wet while I work. I also have a candle just because I like to paint with a little candle lit and makes it all relaxing. We're going to go over our brushes. So I have a palette knife here to mix up my colors. This is not necessary, it's optional. I have a big 1-inch bright brush for my background. We have a variety of other brushes that'll help us paint our daisies. So this is a small round brush. We have a very small detail brush. Okay. A 1/2-inch angle brush. This is a filbert. If you have a smaller version of this would be perfect for your daisies. I'm just showing you the different brushes you can paint them with. So this kind of brush, a filbert, would be very, very helpful. I have a small flat brush, which could also help you paint some daisies. And if you don't like angle brushes to do grasses, you can also use a strip liner like this. This will also be helpful. So those are the brushes we'll be using. I'll put them down here. We're going to be using, of course, titanium white, some burnt umber, phthalo blue green shade, ultramarine blue, some yellow oxide or yellow ochre, they are interchangeable, burnt sienna, some phthalo green blue shade. If you have yellow shade, that's fine. I just want a more bluey green color for my background instead of yellow green. So if you have yellow shade, don't panic, you're good to go. And we're also going to be using cadmium yellow medium. So let's get started. We'll start putting in our background. And for that, we are going to need our phthalo green blue shade. And some phthalo blue green shade. If you're not sure what shade your phthalo blue is, that's fine. It'll work, don't you worry. And then so that it doesn't look like a circus color background, we're also going to put out some burnt sienna to dull out the color that we mix. And we're going to start with that for our background. I want to keep this fairly impressionistic. So maybe we'll put out a tiny little bit of white. Just a little bit. If I can even get any out of my tube. Alright, that'll do. I have to go paint shopping. Alright, so we are going to, mix these two together. I'll take about half the phthalo blue I put down and I'm going to mix it in with this green. And right now the color we're actually mixing is called phthalo turquoise. So if you're at the art store and you really like the background color that we used today and you don't want to mix it every time, you can look for something called phthalo turquoise. Oh, that's beautiful. And we're going to add a little bit of burnt sienna just to dull the colors out a little bit. We might need a little more color than that, so I'm just going to go ahead and put out a little bit more green and then use the rest of my phthalo blue to mix that. Where did I put my green? Right here. Alright. I have my white in case I want to throw in a couple highlights, but for the most part our background is pretty dark. If you look at the reference photo, it is in the description below as per usual. If you want to follow it exactly, I put the gridded version in there as well. I'm going impressionistic, so I'm just kind of referencing the picture, but I'm not going to be doing exactly what I see. A little bit more burnt sienna. Okay, and don't forget, if you don't have these exact paint colors, you can use whatever colors you want. Don't let the art material stop you from creating something beautiful. All right, I think that's good. So we're gonna put our palette knife in our water so that the paint doesn't dry on it. I'm going to grab my big background brush here. This is a 1-inch bristle bright. I'm going to get it damp in the water, but not soaking wet. So if you test it on your hand, it shouldn't be dripping, but you should feel that it is damp. So get that nice and wet in your water. Wipe off the excess, test it on the back of your hand. If you have a water mister, spray your palette so that your paint doesn't dry out. And we are just going to start pasting in our background. So to load my brush, I haven't gone over this very much, but if you're an absolute complete beginner and you've never painted before, you don't want to put your brush directly in the middle of your paint pile. Instead, pull from the side. So pull, 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 and then flip and pull, 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 and it should look like this. There is a hair on mine. The joys of owning cats. Okay, so I'm not just grabbing it in the middle and picking up a gigantic glob. That's going to be very hard to control, and then you might get different results. So I'm pushing it down on my palette to get it all in the bristles. I'm being careful not to get a chunk of paint up here in the metal part because that can damage your brushes. So just pull from the outside and flip your brush, smush it in, and now we're ready. So I'm just going to pick a random side, and I'm just going to start by doing this crisscross motion. I'm actually also going to put, ouch, these paint tubes, they attack me, a little bit of phthalo green on the side and more phthalo blue as well, just so that I can alter the color as I'm working. And if I could squeeze out some more white, that would be fantastic. All right. So we're going to grab a little bit more blue here. I'm also going to put out some burnt sienna so that our background has some versatility and differences in it. Grab a little burnt sienna. I'm going to work in these crisscross motions. I'm making sure that I'm covering all of the white of the canvas, so there's no little white dots left behind. You can grab a little bit of white and add some highlights. Okay, a little bit more blue, more white up here. So I'm being very random with my colors. More of our original mixture with some burnt sienna in it. Some more white. And we'll grab some more blue. More white. More of our original background color and some burnt sienna. I'm putting this on fairly thick so that I could use my blending brush. Forgot to mention that, but yes, a blending brush. Unless you want to leave it streaky like this, that's completely fine. But I'm going to go through with my blending brush and mix all of this together. My main goal here is to cover all the whites of the canvas, doing the edges. And I'm working fairly quickly so that it doesn't start to dry on me. We can even throw in a little bit of yellow if you'd like. A little bit of cadmium yellow medium, just a little bit, just in some random spots here and there. So right now we're painting our darkest values in our background. So in our image, the reference picture, our daisies are facing up. So we're looking directly down at them. That's the perspective here. But they're not all going to be facing like the middle of the flower and fanned out like that. So we'll also be going over some perspective for this painting and how flower petals would lay differently depending on how you're looking at them. So even though this is impressionistic, you're going to learn quite a bit about perspective. Let me go grab my big makeup brush there, my big blending brush. Give me 1 second. Okay, so this is my big fluffy makeup brush that I use for blending paint, and I'm just going to go in a circular motion and light pressure, blend this all in. Okay, that looks pretty good for our first pass. I'm just going to grab a little bit of burnt sienna on my brush, tap in some random spots, and just darken up some of the areas. Okay, again. So burnt sienna is a red-brown, so when it interacts with the phthalo green, it makes a darker color because it dulls it. Okay, we'll maybe grab a little bit of this, put some more here. Blend in a circular motion. Okay, now we are going to let this dry naturally or give it a quick blow dry with our hair dryer on the cool setting. And then we'll be right back, and we might do another coat, but I'm not quite sure yet. I'll have to see what it looks like when it's dry. So go ahead and dry your canvas, and then we'll meet back up. Okay, so our canvas is nice and dry. It is cool to the touch. I would like to add another layer because it is a little bit streaky. I'm not sure if the camera's picking that up, but I could definitely see it here on my end. So I've gone ahead and replenished my palette. So we still have that background color that we mixed. I added some phthalo blue. I've re-added some burnt sienna. I took out some cadmium yellow medium. I managed to squirt out some more white, and I've added some black to add some way darker spots. So I think what I want to do, since we're keeping this impressionistic, I'm going to grab my background brush again. It is damp. I'm going to grab some of this background color, add a little bit more burnt sienna to it to darken it even more, and a little bit of black, not too much. You don't want it to be black, you just want to darken it with some black. Okay, I'm going to wipe off some of the paint because I don't want a lot, and we're going to do a scrubbing technique here. So I want it to be dark here in the corner. So I'm just going to scrub some dark color in. Whoops. Cheers. So scrub some of that in. Okay. I want to add some here as well. So I'm just going to do all of the darkest colors first, and then we'll add some lighter colors. So there's not a whole lot of paint on my brush. Scrub, scrub, scrub. Add some in this corner here. So we're just darkening up some spots on our background. We're adding a second layer. Because for the most part, our background in our reference image is fairly dark. Because we have all these daisies casting shadows on the grass. Okay, now I'm going to go in just with the background color. We might even add a little bit of yellow to it. Wipe off my brush. Scrub some of that in. We're going to connect all these lines together. I'm making sure if this is dry, leave it alone. You don't want to lift off the paint by accident. Maybe add a little bit more yellow here. That was quite a bit, so we'll add some of our background color. And we'll just blend that all in. We can add a little bit of blue and white if we'd like. Scrub some of that in there too. Wipe off the excess paint from your brush when you want to blend and use a lighter pressure. But again, most of this will be covered up by our daisies. I'm just doing this to make sure that I do have a good background coverage. Just our straight background color here. And we're scrubbing, scrubbing, scrubbing. Maybe grab some more blue, a little bit of burnt sienna, add some white. We'll grab more of our background color, add some burnt sienna and some black, get a darker color here. So we're just scrubbing this in, keeping it super random. It's gonna look crazy, but don't worry, most of it will be covered up. Okay, you can go over and smooth some stuff out like this. Okay, I think I'm happier with this, so we're gonna give that a blow dry again, or let it dry naturally. I'm gonna mist my palette, and then we are going to add a couple stems for the flowers, but not too many. And then we'll add in some daisies. So let's give this a dry and then we'll be back. So it is all nice and dry once again. It's cool to the touch. I brought you in a little bit closer because we will be adding some grasses and some stems, and I feel like this is a new technique that I haven't shown you yet. So I'll bring you in nice and close so you can see what I'm doing. I also ran out of background color, so I'm just gonna mix some really quickly. We don't need a whole lot. I just want to have some of our base color here. So again, that was the phthalo blue green shade and the phthalo green blue shade. A little bit of burnt sienna. Okay. I still have some cadmium yellow medium, some white. I don't think we'll need black anymore, but we'll keep it on the palette just in case. And now I'm gonna go in with my angle brush. I like this brush because you get a really nice straight edge and it's perfect for making grasses. So when I'm using this for an angle brush, I'm going to keep the long side down and flick upwards. Okay, so I'm finishing the stroke by lifting off like this. Okay, I'm not sure if you guys can see what I'm doing. Okay, so we'll do it on the canvas. If you don't have an angle brush, you can use a liner brush like this. So this, you just need to thin your paint down a little bit more and then you can get some straight lines. Some round brushes, I just prefer to do it with the angle brush. So I'm going to get my brush nice and wet, testing it on my hand to make sure it's not dripping. Okay, you see that's a little too much. I'm going to wipe some of it off. There we go, perfect. And now I'm going to need to do a little bit lighter color. So I'm going to grab our background color and I'm going to add a little bit of yellow to it. Okay. And again, I'm loading my brush like this. There's not a lot of paint on my brush and you can see this nice straight edge. And I'm going to start making some grasses. I'll move my palette here. Now on our picture, if you zoom in and you look, all of our stems are kind of pointing in upward directions like this. There's not very many pointing down or sideways. So we're just going to start picking random spots and making a few stems. Not every daisy is going to have one. We're just going to give an idea of it. So I'll start right here, plant your brush down and just move it up. Okay, I'm moving around the canvas. All I'm doing is flicking my brush. I'm not putting a lot of pressure. Just picking some random spots. Adding some stems. Some could cross over each other. Okay, now we're gonna pick a different color and do the same thing. Maybe we'll do, whoops, some more phthalo blue and white. Mix it with our background color to get a nice blue-green. This will make it look like these are getting less sun, so they're more in shadow, which is why they're looking blue. And we're just gonna start flicking some of those in as well. Okay, you can barely see it, that's fine. Grab a little bit more white if you have to. Okay, they could cross over each other, they could overlap. Keep it random. They're not all these perfect straight lines in a row. You can curve your brush stroke. Grab a bit more blue, a bit more white. Some of our background color, maybe a little bit of burnt sienna to change it up again. And I don't want to do too many of these super light ones because again, there are a lot of daisies that are going to be overlapping these and they would be casting a shadow. Sorry about the glare also. Green is a very shiny color, so it reflects a lot. I'm gonna rinse off my brush and we'll do a couple of darker stems as well. And to do that, we're gonna grab our background color with some burnt sienna and a tiny little bit of black. Just a tiny bit. And we'll add a couple darker stems as well. You'll barely be able to see this on camera, but in person you can see it and it will make a difference. It'll add some dimension to your painting. Okay, a little bit more water on my brush if it's not flowing right. Okay, so that's all we'll do for stems for now. We'll add a few more later on once our daisies are on top, but let's give this a blow dry and then we'll add in the very base color of our daisies. All right, our canvas is nice and dry. It is cool to the touch and it's ready for our next step. I went ahead and changed out my water. I want clean water here for this next part, and I've added new colors to my palette, so let's go over that. I've added my yellow oxide or yellow ochre, whichever one you have, some ultramarine blue, and my burnt umber, and I squeezed out a little bit more white. And we still have our other colors back here, which is perfect. And now what we're gonna do is start putting in the center of some of our flowers so we can decide where we want them to go. Now, if you don't feel comfortable doing this with just paint, you can grab a piece of kids' school chalk. You can get this at the dollar store or Walmart or whatever. And you can put in some circles. So if you want one that's attached to this stem, you can just draw in a circle for the center of your flower and just decide where you want them that way. So if you look at your reference, we're not going to put in every single flower, but you can attach some to the stems that you do see. So we can add another one here. I'm just putting in the centers. This is not what they're gonna look like. I'm just deciding where I for sure want some of them to be. Add some here. Some could be bigger than others. If you don't have this, just do it with the paint. I'll do a few and then I'll show you what I mean. You can have some that are off the canvas so that it looks like your image continues. That's visually appealing. We can add some here, some like this. Some up here. Okay, so you can do that with some kids chalk and define all your circles. And the kids chalk comes off with just water. So you can just grab a damp brush or a damp paper towel and then just wipe it off. Or you can just go ahead and do it with the paint. So I'm gonna grab my round brush. I'm gonna get it damp in my water jar, test it out on my hand. And for the centers, I'm going to grab some yellow oxide and a little bit of burnt sienna. I want a nice dark reddish orange color. That's also a dark yellow, I guess. I want a dark yellow. And I don't have a ton of paint on my brush. And I'm just gonna put in some of our centers so that I know where I want my flowers. So I'm just going to dab it in. They don't have to be perfect circles. They are flowers, so they'll be a little uneven. This is just our super base coat. We'll be adding more. Okay. So I'm not creating a perfect circle. I'm just tapping and adding in these circles. And it's just as a guide for right now. So don't make them too big. Okay, and I'm not making them perfect like this. Some are flatter, and that'll help us with our perspective. So I just went ahead, grabbed a little bit more of that color. Okay, like that. You can make some that are flatter at the bottom and more dome on the top. So this is just super rough, and again, we're doing this impressionistic style, so it's okay if they're a little bit weird, because in the end, it'll make a super nice painting. Just have faith in yourself, have faith in the process. It is acrylic, which requires many layers. Just grab some more paint. Okay. I'm just tapping in, making irregular shapes that are semicircular but not perfect circles. I'm just going to mix up some more of the color that we had with some burnt sienna and yellow oxide or yellow ochre. I'm going to put some more in. And I'm going to dry this really fast, and then we'll add in some first layers of petals. All right, so our centers are nice and dry. This is probably looking like a hot mess to you, but don't worry, trust the process. So if you still have some chalk lines here that are showing, if you did it with chalk, just grab a piece of paper towel or a brush and get it damp, but not soaking wet. Like, I'm not trying to wring it out here and have a bunch of water fall out. And just gently, you can just wipe it away. Don't do this if your centers are still wet, because you will smudge them everywhere. But I'm just lightly erasing my chalk lines. Okay, easy as that. Just go over it and erase them. You can do this with a damp brush. All right, now we're gonna start adding in our petals. And again, if you don't feel comfortable just freehanding it, you can always use your kids' chalk and just add some lines. So general rule of thumb is that the petals come from the center of the flower. So if we're doing one that's staring straight up at us, we're not gonna do it like all wonky. Okay, your petals aren't gonna look like this. They genuinely all come in from the center. So if it helps you, you can make a grid, okay? You can make an X like this and then connect it and then know where your petals are gonna be so that your flower isn't shaped funny. But that's only if the petals are facing us straight ahead, straight up. If your petals are looking, if your flower's curved in a different direction, so this is the center looking straight at us, all of the petals are going to be coming out of the center. If you turn your flower, however, the petals that are closer to us are going to appear longer and the back ones are shorter. So they would maybe be like this, and then we'd have some longer petals here. So it all depends on your flower's perspective. So if you want to draw in every single petal, that's fine. Or you can just freehand it and just trust the process. I'm just gonna wipe off the chalk marks. Okay. I like to just go with it. So I'm gonna rinse out my round brush. So this is the brush I'll be using to do my petals, but you can use a filbert brush if you had a smaller one. Mine's a little bit big for what I wanna do, so I'm not gonna use my filbert. You can use an angle brush, a flat brush, whatever brush you are comfortable with. And again, if you look at your reference, we all know that daisies are white, but if you look at your reference image, you can see that some are in shadow, some are in direct sunlight, and if you zoom in and you really look, you can see that the daisies aren't all pure white. They have some blue undertones, a little bit of a blue-gray color to them. So we're gonna need to represent that. So I'm gonna grab a little bit of my ultramarine blue and some of my burnt umber, just a little bit of burnt umber. I want to keep this blue, but I want to gray it out with the burnt umber. Okay, So I have a nice color like this. And now I'm gonna add some white. And we're gonna create our shadow colors. This is what our daisies are. All of the base petals that we're gonna put in are gonna be this color. So I'm just gonna mix up a bigger batch, because we'll be doing a few. A little bit more blue. Okay, and we don't want pure white. We don't want it super dark either, so I think that's a good place to start. We'll add a little bit more blue. All right. So I have a lot of paint in my brush, but it's not a big glob. And what I'm gonna do is, just gonna go over some perspective. So we'll say this one's looking at us, it's perfectly planted. So I'm gonna start in the middle here. I'm gonna press down and just flick up a petal, okay? Just like that. And then beside it, I'm gonna press down and flick a petal again. So I'm putting the most pressure at the top and releasing it near the bottom. So my stroke is pressing down and then lifting as I go. All of them are gonna meet towards the middle, okay? They'd be growing from the center. And this is our base color that we're creating right now. So I'm gonna grab a little bit more paint. And they don't have to be all perfect, okay? Petals would curve. You can leave some gaps. As long as, rule of thumb, you're pressing down here and releasing the pressure at the bottom, and it would connect to the center of the flower, okay? So we're just gonna keep adding some petals. You can leave some gaps. Okay, and don't worry if you're going into your circle, that's fine. We'll be adding more layers to the middle of our flower. And then if you want to make sure you're keeping it centered and perspective is okay, you can add one down here to make sure that you're keeping up with the shape that you want. Okay, you can add one to the side. They could all be different lengths. They don't have to all be the same length. Okay, we'll add one here too. And if it helps you, if you can't turn your wrist like that, I'm just going to untape my canvas. You can 100% turn your work. Okay, move your canvas, not your body. And see how it's streaking like that? I just don't have enough water on my brush. So I'm just going to press down, release as I go down towards the middle. Okay, and then just fill in these gaps. Okay. And then if you look at your reference, you can see that some petals overlap other petals. We'll figure that out when we add in our highlights to see which petal we want in the front, which one we want in the back. So don't stress about that just quite yet. Okay. Okay, this is a perfect teaching opportunity here. So you see I made a dot and I don't want a dot there, so I can just clean it up. I'm gonna use a damp brush. So I'm gonna use a clean damp brush, and I'm gonna get rid of this little blob of paint here that I created by accident while it's still wet. You could wait for it to dry and just paint over it, but I'm just gonna remove it with a damp brush and then put it in water so that it doesn't dry. And there we go. So we have our base petals here. If our flower's looking straight up at us, they're all different sizes, they're spaced out. Okay, now we're gonna pretend that our flower's looking away from us. Okay, so I'm going to plant my brush here and I'm going to drag down. Okay, I'm going to turn my canvas to help me out. And if your paint is streaky and it's not covering properly, just add a little bit more water to your brush to help the flow. Okay. So it's like this flower's looking away and the petals are a little bit different. So I'm just going to, again, keep it from the middle of our canvas. Not our canvas, the center of our flower. It's very hard to talk and paint at the same time. Okay. I'm gonna add a little bit this way. Okay, and it'll make sense when we re-put our circle in. But it's like this daisy is looking away from us and it's slightly bent. So the petals are coming this way, and then when we put in our highlights, it'll make more sense. So I'm not making them perfectly rounded like in the picture. If that's how you want it, that's fine. I'm just keeping mine impressionistic so that we know they're daisies, but they're not perfect daisies, which is why I chose this style of painting, because it's super accessible to beginners, because we're painting the idea of the flowers, not the actual entire flower. Okay, and this one's a little smaller, so let's just add some petals. So I'm pressing down, releasing as I go. Some petals can be curved differently as long as they're all meeting towards the center. Grab some more paint on your brush. Okay. Let's do this one here. How do I want this one? Let's look at our reference and pick a flower that we like. Okay. So again, from the middle. Okay, they don't have to be perfect. This is impressionistic. I just want to make sure I'm covering the canvas here. So if there's little gaps, just add more water to your paint. Okay. I am running out of my background color, so I'm just going to mix more. A little bit of blue, a little bit of burnt umber, and some white. Okay, and we're just gonna keep doing that to the entire little bits of circles that we have. Okay, make sure you get that bottom there. Okay, and sometimes the way the flower's facing, it would be like kind of covering the middle here. So if we plant this one and make the petals shorter, it's like it's facing away from us this way. So we'll make these little back petals a little bit shorter. And then when we get to the front, it's like hugging it. So they're meeting in the middle, but they're not pointing out perfectly. Do you see what I mean here? I kind of curved in some little petals this way. So they are attached to the center, but they would be like hugging the flower, okay? And you can zoom in, take a screenshot, pause the video. I feel like the quicker you go, the less you can think about it, and then the more natural your petals are gonna look. You can add as few or as many petals as you'd like. This is your painting, so feel free to be creative with it. You're not stuck creating it exactly like me. Okay. Okay, for this one, we'll put another one that's facing downwards, like this. Okay, so just play around with it. This is meant to be fun. You're learning different brush strokes. So again, what I'm doing is pressing down harder at the top and then releasing my pressure as I come down and meet the middle. Okay, I'm making sure my petals are all connected to the center. I'm not worried about going over the circle because we'll be adding different layers. It could all be different. You can leave some gaps. You can make some more rounded ones, some more pointed ones. They're flowers, they're in nature, they're all different and unique, kind of like us, like people. Which is what's absolutely beautiful about nature. Maybe we'll make another one that's being hugged by the flower. So it'll look crazy before it looks good. Don't worry about it. Okay, when we re-add the middle, it'll all make sense. Okay, maybe these petals are shorter because the flower's a little bit tilted. Just making sure I'm covering the background. Just gonna grab a little bit more water on my brush if my paint is streaking. Okay. Add some curves to your petals. They don't have to be all perfectly straight. Maybe this one will add some like this. So just have fun with it, play around with different petal shapes. Mix some more paint because I'm running out. A little bit of ultramarine, a little bit of burnt umber. Mix it in with a little bit of white. Okay, if it's easier for you to do it like this to visualize it better, go ahead. Turn your canvas if you need to. Don't be afraid to move it around. It's not glued down to your workstation. You can definitely move it. You can do it like this, like when we did it with our chalk lines, to make sure that your petals are good if they're facing you. And then just add some petals in between. For a little bit of a fuller daisy. Okay. Okay, let's do a different shape again. So you can leave some gaps as well. So maybe there's like little short ones like this. Okay. Okay, we'll do another little one. Okay, so the quicker you go, the more natural they're gonna look. We'll go back over the centers, don't you worry. Don't stress about that quite yet. So pressing down, releasing the pressure. as I get towards the bottom. You can curve your petals as long as they all meet in the middle. Getting some more water on my brush because I'm getting these little skipping dots here. Okay, some could be more bare. You can fill some out super full flowers. I'm mixing up some more color again with my ultramarine blue, burnt umber, and a little bit of white. Okay. And we're just gonna keep doing this until we are happy with our flowers for our first coat. Again, if your paint is leaving little dots on your canvas, just add a little bit more water. Go right off the edge of the canvas. Mixing up some more color. You can just mix a big batch. I just find it saves paint if you just mix as you go. Okay, maybe this one will be another one that's like hugging the flower. So the petals are a little bit shorter. Okay. Add another little guy here. I'm just making sure I'm covering all of the holes on the canvas. Okay, one more for our base layer of flowers. So I'm mixing up some more background color again with the ultramarine blue, the burnt umber, some white. And again, if you want to follow the chalk lines that we made in the beginning, that's completely fine. This one's like a little guy. There we go. So we'll start with that for now. Now we're going to let this dry or give it a quick blow dry with our hair dryer. I'm going to mist my palette to keep my paints moist. So that looks pretty awesome so far. I'm happy with this already, and we haven't even overlapped anything yet. So give this a blow dry. And then we are going to add some highlights in some places, and it's going to start all taking place and shaping up. So let's pause and meet back up. All right, these are all nice and dry, and before we add some highlights, we're just going to talk about perspective a little bit. So this flower here, the petals are out like this. These ones are a little bit longer. It's like the flower has her center here, and the petals are your fingers. They're kind of curved up like this. Okay? And then the back ones would be curved a little bit more. This one, the flower's tilted, so we're only seeing these petals here, so it's going to be more of a dome, kind of flatter at the bottom. Same with this one and this one. This one with the petals over top like this, that were kind of hugging the flower, it's tilted and curved. Okay? These ones are tilting outwards like this, so it's like the petals are coming this way instead. I hope that makes sense. We'll add some highlights and hopefully it'll make a little bit more sense. So we're gonna rinse out our brush, get most of the blue out. We're going to grab a little bit of our background color here because we don't want pure white just yet, because we'll be overlapping some flowers, so we're not sure if our highlights are going to make sense until we add the other layer, but we need some. So we're going to create a lighter version of this that's not exactly pure white. If you can tell the difference here, it's close to white, but not exactly. Okay, and then we're going to start highlighting. And again with this, I like to do it quick and randomly, but if you're looking at perspective, the tips of these ones will be lighter and they'll go darker in the middle because this is inside the flower and this is poking up. Okay, so whatever has highlights is looking towards us, it's a little bit more up, and whatever has a shadow is like it's deeper and it's a little bit further from us. Okay, so maybe we'll start with this. So this is connected to the center, so it would be a bit darker, and then the highlight would be right at the tip. So we're just going to touch and drag. We don't have to cover the whole thing. Okay, these are kind of far back, so maybe they get a little bit of a highlight, but not too much. Okay, so like this. So I'm leaving some blue. I'm gonna zoom you in just to talk about it a little bit. Okay, so I went ahead and zoomed you in so that you can really see what I'm doing. So again with these, they'll be lighter here and get darker. So I'm gonna release some pressure when I get towards here. Okay, and I'm keeping it random because we are doing this impressionistic style. Okay. It'll all make sense after. And if you took out too much of your shadow, I'll show you how to glaze it back in. Okay, there's not enough water on my brush, so you can see it's making these little dots here. So I'm just gonna grab some more paint, grab some more water on my brush, take out a cat hair, and just kind of connect these, okay? So I'm leaving some blue, and from close that might look weird, but when you back up and you look at it, it starts to make sense, and when we re-add our center, it would be casting a shadow around the flower because it isn't flat, it's a three-dimensional shape, right? So now I'm gonna zoom you back out, and we'll just keep adding highlights to our flowers. So this one that's facing directly at us is gonna take a little bit more highlights. I need a little bit more paint on my brush. Okay. And if you have petals that are overlapping like this one, leave a little gap to show that it's casting a shadow. Okay, if you can see what I did there. There's so much cat hair around my brushes today. I don't understand how it gets there. I keep them in a closed container. The brushes, not the cats. Okay. So I'm just adding highlights. They don't have to cover all of the background that we did. Okay. And again, if you can't move your wrist like this, turn the canvas. It's okay, you're allowed to turn the canvas. Okay. You see how cool that looks already? I love painting daisies. So I'm just gonna mix up a little bit more color here. So I'm running out. So again, making almost a pure white, but tinting it with some blue. Okay. So I have too much paint on my brush. You want quite a bit of paint, but not so much that it's gonna overwhelm. So these ones will have highlights at the tips, but not so much as we get in. I'm trying not to make a straight edge like this, so maybe like feather it out. Okay, like that. Leave some blue hanging out. Okay, so now you guessed it, we're gonna give that a quick blow dry, and then we're gonna add a few more, maybe some that are overlapping. But first we're gonna fix the center of these ones. So we're gonna give this a dry, fix the centers. We might add a little bit of shadows back in where we took too much out, and then we'll add some flowers that slightly overlap these ones so that it looks like it's more realistic. Okay, so now our canvas is nice and dry. Let me move this around maybe without the glare so you can see what's happening. Okay, now we're going to do another layer of the center of our flowers so that we're able to do our other flowers on top and not worry too much about the overlapping situation. So rinse out your round brush. Make sure it's not soaking wet. And we're just going to do the same thing with our yellow oxide or yellow ochre and our burnt sienna. Okay, my paint's starting to feel a little tacky, so I'm just going to mist it with my water mister. And I'm just going to go over the flower centers real quick. Make sure there's not a ton of paint on my brush. I'm just going to tap it in. Okay. So if the flower's being hugged a little bit, I'm making that center a little bit flatter at the bottom, rounder at the top. Okay, so we're just going right back over this. I'm not making perfect circles, but if that's what you'd like, that's fine. Okay, so I'm just mixing up some more color. Again, you can pause, take a screenshot if you want to make it look exactly like how I'm doing it. So this one round on the top because the petals are away, so it's bent a little bit, and then a little bit flatter at the bottom here. Get a little bit of water on my brush so that the paint flows easier. Okay, so some have flatter edges at the bottom. Make sure the tops are nice and rounded. Okay. Grab more paint. Went over the line a little bit there. That's okay. Okay, so again, if you need to reference, you can look at the reference picture and see how the centers are interacting with the different flower shapes. So a little bit flatter at the bottom, more rounded on the top. Okay. Take your time with this. Okay. There we go. Grab some more paint. All right, I think I got every single one. So we're gonna let that dry, and then we're gonna add some highlights to the center of our flowers as well. So dry that and then meet me back up here. All right, our centers are nice and dry, and now to highlight these, it's important to note that the center of a flower is like a ball. So again, whatever is facing up is gonna get more light. So it's like a sphere, so if it's facing upwards, it's going to have more of a highlight. And then the bottom of the ball is going to catch less sun, so it's going to be a little bit darker. So I'm just going to rinse out my brush. And I'm going to go into my cadmium yellow medium. I'm just going to make sure I don't get green into it. And I'm just going to go in with just the straight cadmium for now. Yellow is a bit transparent, so this might take a couple layers, but we'll decide afterwards. So this one's kind of facing us, so we're just going to start tapping in some color. Okay. We're going to leave some of the background showing through, but since it was facing us, the top of that ball is going to be a little bit lighter, so when we add in our next highlight, because we always do 3 color variations, we're going to have the lowest shadow, the mid-tone, and the highlight. So this is our mid-tone right now. We're going to leave the edges a little bit darker, put our mid-tone in the center, since this flower is looking straight at us. For this one, it's a little bit tilted, so we're going to put the highlight on the top and fade it into the bottom. Okay. I'm doing these little tapping motions because your flower center has some texture. So the top of this one is going to have the most highlight, so we're adding our mid-tone, and then when we add our most bright highlight, we're going to add it to the top here instead of in the center. Same thing with this one. Okay. Fade it into that bottom edge. I'm doing little tap and drag motions. Okay. There we go. Grab some more paint. Okay. So we're just highlighting. This one's being hugged, so the highlight's definitely on the top. We're going to leave the bottom of it quite dark. I need some more paint. Okay, I'm doing little dabs so it creates some texture. Little dabs. Okay, so you can start to see how it's coming together. This one's looking straight at us, so we're going to add it to here. Just like this one, we're going to leave the edges dark. Tap and drag. This one is going to be a highlight on the top. Fade it into the bottom. This one's being hugged by its petals, so the darkest part will be the bottom, and we're going to highlight the top. Okay. It's okay if some are brighter than others because they're at different levels. So this one's looking at us, so we're gonna shade the center. There we go. This one's pointing slightly away from us, so our highlights are gonna be at the top edge here. We're gonna fade it into the bottom. I don't have a ton of paint on my brush while I'm doing this. This one is definitely being highlighted at the top here. More of a shadow at the bottom. Same with this one. Highlight on the top. So again, you can look at an actual sphere and put it in the light to see where it would be hitting it depending on how it's looking. Okay, fade out the bottom. This one as well is looking away from us like this, so this part would be catching the most sun, and then the bottom would be catching a little bit less sun, so just fade it in. Okay, highlight the top of this one because the petals are hugging it. Leave the bottom a little bit darker. Same with this one here. Okay. There we go. Grab some more paint on your brush. Highlight the top of this one. Okay. And the more you practice this, the more it'll make sense. This is all about perspective and the way the flowers are looking. I'm not covering all of the yellow. You can still see some of the darker yellow through it. This one we're going to highlight the center like this. Maybe we'll do another coat real quick over some that are already dry. If it's not dry yet, don't try to add another layer. You're just going to pick that paint right up. Okay. And now it looks like some of these are kind of floating on top of the flowers. So while that's drying, what we're going to do is use the same brush, and we're going to get it nice and rinsed to make sure there's nothing left on it. And we're going to create a darker version of the first color we did for our petals. So we're going to grab some of this and add more blue. Okay, a little bit more burnt umber to gray it out. Well, that's too much burnt umber. All right, like this. And now what we're going to do is glaze. So we're going to, if you have a glazing medium, that's optimal, but you don't need it. So I'm just adding water and I'm thinning this paint down. I'm going to rinse out my brush to make sure there's no extra pigment. And I'm going to grab this watered down version. It's going to be transparent. If you can see your palette through it, you're doing it right. And now, especially on this one, it looks like the center is kind of just floating there. So it would be casting a shadow on the petals down here. So I'm just going to add a little bit of a shadow to the petals there. So I'm using extremely light pressure. You can blend out the edges with your fingers. Okay, so this is us re-adding the shadows like I was talking about. So the center would be casting a shadow on the flowers. So if you have a glazing medium like this is my absolute favorite one, gloss glazing liquid. I'm going to put some out on my palette to show you what that does. So when you add too much water to acrylic paint, you risk underbinding it and it not sticking to your canvas. You should be fine though, as long as you're not using way too much. And I'm going to add some of the glazing medium to my paint. And what that's doing is making it transparent, but without me having to use water. So it's going to give us the same effect. It's just a little bit fancier if you want to treat yourself a little bit. So this one too would be casting a shadow on these petals back here. So I'm just going to add a little shadow. And again, see, it's basically the same thing as just using water, so you don't need the glazing medium. Okay, don't go run out and buy it if you don't have to. This one, they'd be darker here and a little bit on the back here. So what I'm doing with this step while the center is drying, I'm just adding another layer of shadows because the center would be casting shadows on these petals since it is a sphere. Okay, so this one would be casting some here and also a little bit at the bottom, right here. Okay, and we're doing that so that it looks like it's sitting in the flower, not just sitting on top of it. Okay, so using my thinned down background color that we used for the flowers. Whoops, not enough water there, that's fine. Just grab some more and smudge it out. Okay, it would be casting these shadows. Okay, this one's fine. This one would get a little bit here and also a little bit on the top. Okay, and it looks like it's barely making a difference, but in person it makes a huge difference. Okay, I'm just mixing up some more burnt umber and ultramarine, more water. So I'm thinning it down. It's not dripping off my plate, but there is water, and make sure you rinse off the extra pigment so that you don't accidentally get a big color load on there. So I'm gonna grab this thinned out color I made, and we're gonna just keep going. So this one, there'd be shadow here and also at the bottom here. And if you're getting a straight line like that, just dab it out with your finger or a brush. Same with this one, there'd be shadow right there, right here. Okay, we're getting there. If you are painting along and you want to show me your work, make sure to check out the Facebook group. It's linked in the description below. And then you can show me what you did. Everyone is extremely supportive in there. We're a lot of fun. You get to vote on other tutorials. So again, just adding a shadow to this. Okay, more water on your brush. Okay, this one here. So basically you want to just get where you think the middle of the flower would be casting a shadow. There we go. So now it looks less like they're floating and more like they're part of the actual flower. We're gonna add a little highlight to the center again, so a lighter version of the yellow we had. So we're gonna grab our cadmium yellow medium. We're gonna grab a little bit of white and make sure that there is no blue in it because we don't want green, we want a lighter yellow. And if you think it's too light, acrylics do dry darker, so don't panic. We're just gonna create a lighter version. And we are going to go in the middle of the highlights that we created and just dab in a little bit of a more bright highlight. Okay. Dab it in with your finger. Whoops, too much white. Too much white on my brush. Okay, so this one, highlight the top. And we're not covering all of the previous yellow, we're just going in the middle of it. For the flowers that we highlighted the top of, the brightest color is going to go on the top. Okay. Here. Right there. Here. Okay, so just jump around, do all of your flowers. Okay, it's looking pretty wonderful. I hope you're painting along. I hope you're enjoying this tutorial. There are many more. I put one up every Tuesday and every Friday. There's tips and tricks videos, there's understanding acrylic videos, there's a galaxy, a beach, these daisies. What else did we do so far? A rainy window. I'm just going to tap out the bottom here to fuzz it out. Okay. Oops, too much at the bottom. Okay, now we're ready to add another layer of daisies. So we're going to let this dry, we're going to give it a quick blow dry, and we'll add a couple more daisies on top, and we'll meet back up. I've gone ahead and sped this part up because we are repeating the exact same process we did for our first layer of daisies for this second layer here. Don't be afraid to let them overlap and touch other flowers because that's how they would be in nature. You can add as many or as little as you want, and it will look amazing as long as you're following the process. Okay, there we go. And then while that is drying, instead of blow drying again, what we're gonna do is work on some shadows on the petals that are underneath the other petals. So we're gonna do the same thing we did to add the shadows like we did with the centers for the other ones. So I'm going to grab some ultramarine blue and grab some burnt umber and mix them together off to the side here. I'm gonna find a clean spot on my palette. Okay, you can use glazing medium if you have it, or thin it down with some water. Okay, you want it to be transparent, but you don't want it to drip. When you turn your palette, you're gonna rinse off your extra pigment so that you don't get too much color on there, because we do want it to be transparent. I'm gonna add a bit of glazing medium to mine, but you don't have to. And now we're gonna look at the flowers that are underneath the other ones, and we're gonna shade those petals. So shade them, okay, to show that the other petal's on top of it, because it would be casting a shadow. All right, and we're just going to keep doing that until we did all of them. So this one as well, this petal would have some shadows, and this one too. maybe even some part of this one. A little bit here. This one would definitely have a shadow right here. Okay. This one too, behind it, I'm gonna grab a little bit more of that watery color mixture. So this whole petal can be in shadow. There we go. This one would also be in shadow. And here, this flower here as well. So I'm just being careful. I'm adding some shade to some of the petals. This one too. Okay, I think I got all of the overlapping petals. I think so. Maybe we'll add some shadow to this one because it's sitting below this guy. There we go. Okay, now we're gonna rinse that off and we are going to grab our mixture of cadmium, yellow, medium, and white. And we are going to add the final highlights to the top of our flowers. So just the cadmium yellow and some white. There we go. And now again, we are going to add some shadows around our flower centers so that they look like they're part of the flowers. So same thing, we're going to use this watered down mixture that we made with our ultramarine blue and our burnt umber. You can use some glazing medium. Just make sure you wipe off the extra pigment by rinsing your brush because it won't be transparent if you have a huge glob of that paint on there. Oh, I got some yellow. That's not what we want. That's okay. Rinse your brush. And just do it again. There we go. A little burnt umber. It's hard to see. I'll move it to here. It's hard to see over top of that green. I'm sorry. So again, you don't want it to drip if you turn your palette, but you do want it transparent. So we're just going to go over those centers just like we did with the other flowers. And we're just going to darken those middles up. Now, we're going to, you could be done here if you'd like. If you're a complete beginner, you could absolutely be done right here, okay? Just go ahead and sign yours. I would sign mine in the back, but if you want to take it a step further, we are going to go over some of these flowers completely to make it look like there's flowers that are taller and some that are shorter. So I'm going to give this a dry and then I'm going to show you guys something pretty cool. All right, so this is all nice and dry now. And I'm going to switch brushes. You can keep using the same one, but this is just for glazing purposes. If you want to do this step, I like using a stiff brush. I'm going to get it damp in the jar. And I'm going to grab some of that ultramarine and burnt umber again. And create a glaze. Either with some water or with some glazing medium. I'm going to keep it more on the blue side than the brown side. Make sure it's nice and transparent. Rinse off the extra pigment from my brush. Okay. Wipe off the excess water. Grab my glaze. And I'm going to pick some flowers and put them more in shadow. So we're going to pick this one and make it darker. So we're going to glaze over the entire flower. And it's going to make it look like this one is more on top than this one. So it's shorter. We can make this one a little bit shorter so the other flowers would be casting a shadow on it. We can also make this one a little bit shorter. I'm just going to mix up more glaze here. There we go. And maybe we'll make this one a bit shorter. Go right over top the center, all of the petals. It's transparent, so it'll keep all its highlights and lowlights, but the fact that it's a darker blue color will make it look like it's more in the flower bed and a little bit shorter than all of the other flowers. So I'm going to do the same with this little buddy in the corner here. Go right over the entire flower. I'm going to need a smidge more ultramarine blue on my palette because I did run out and I need a little bit more. So I'm going to squeeze out as little of it as possible. And I'm just going to mix the glaze again. So some ultramarine blue, a little bit of burnt umber. Okay. Keep it more on the blue side. Okay, grab some glaze or some water. Rinse off your extra pigment from your brush. Get most of the water out. And then grab that and just keep doing that with some flowers. So maybe this little flower here is also shorter than all the other ones. So just get some glaze and darken that flower. There we go. Go right over the yellow. There we are. So that one's shorter now. We can maybe make this one shorter as well. So go right over that. Again, if you don't want to do this step, you don't have to. Okay, this is not mandatory. It's just an option. It's to make it look like your flowers are all different heights. I find this step fun because then you get to really create your own garden. Just misting my palette, my paint's getting tacky. Okay, maybe we'll make, this one a little bit shorter too. And I'm not worried about the background because my paint is transparent, so it's not changing the background at all. We can make this one shorter as well. And there we go. Now we have different depths. And we're gonna leave that like that. And now we are going to add the whitest highlights to our flowers. So I'm going to get some fresh white out of the tube. If I can. Yes, there we go. And now we're going to add some very white highlights to only a few of our flowers. Okay? So just go straight into your pure white. This is why we weren't using pure white earlier as well, so that we can add this extra step and add our third color value. So we did this dark one, almost white, and now pure white, but we're not gonna add it to all of the flowers. So this one's on top, and I'm not even gonna do all of the petals either. Just some of them. Just like this. Okay, you see that difference? I'm not going to do it to the flowers that we pushed down by adding a glaze to. I'm going to leave those ones alone. Okay, and I'm only going to highlight some of these flowers with the pure white. Again, I'm not doing every petal. I'm not covering all of them. Just a little bit to add that third value. Okay. Something like this. There we go. A little bit to this one. I'm going quickly so that I don't overthink it. But this is just the pure white. Okay. There we go. A little bit more to this one. Here. We can add a few to this one here. That's looking awesome. I'm loving this painting so far. I love painting daisies. It's very relaxing. There we go. Keep going in with just that pure white. I'm not covering the entire petal. I'm also not doing every single petal, just some parts of some petals. Okay. Oh, that looks so good. There. I hope you're enjoying this tutorial. I really hope you show me your work. If you have some questions, feel free to ask them in the comments below. I check the comments pretty often. Okay, don't forget to turn your canvas and not your body if that's easier for you. There. We push that one back so it wouldn't get any highlights. Make sure there's enough water on your brush. There we go. We'll add a little bit more to this one here. There. A little bit to this one. Okay. I think that I'm happy with how those flowers are looking. So now, last step. Again, you can leave these like this, absolutely, okay? You can be done right here. I'm just gonna add a couple more stems just to define some, and then we'll be done. So what I'm gonna do is grab my angle brush from the beginning, the one I used to add those little grasses. I'm going to get it damp in my jar. And I'm going to take the turquoise from our background. If yours is dry or you had none left, we mix it with the phthalo blue and the phthalo green. I'm gonna add some yellow, not too much, just a little bit. I'm gonna get it to this color right here. And I'm just gonna add a few stems to some of the flowers. So they would be coming from the center again. So the center of the flower, I'm gonna make a line in my mind and just add a little stem. And if you can't see, you can add a little bit more yellow. That's fine. Okay, because you would be able to see some of these stems a little bit better. So this one, and you can go right over other flowers as well. So I'm just gonna go right over this one and straight down over here. And that's okay, you can do that. And grab more of that turquoise color. It's a little bit transparent. Okay, there we go. More yellow. A little bit of white. Okay, we'll add one to this one. They don't have to be attached to anything. Just fade out the bottom. You can use your finger. You can use a brush. You don't even need to do this step. I'm just adding a few so that they look a little bit more cohesive. So pretending it's from the center of the flower. There we go. Just a few little stems to show that these are all connected to the ground somehow. Okay, you can add even a couple more lines of grasses. Go over some of the flowers. Okay. And we can add one to this. You can add again, add some grass. Go over some of these petals. Okay. There we go. I think I'm gonna call that done. So go ahead and sign yours. I'll sign mine in the back. We'll take a tour around the canvas, and that's it. Congratulations, you painted a nice field of daisies, and I hope you enjoyed it. So here's what the finished painting looks like. If you've enjoyed this tutorial, please leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell to be notified when I upload next. I'll be posting a new tutorial every Tuesday and Friday. If you followed along with me, please join the Facebook group in the description below and show me your work. Thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate you a lot, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye!